Thanks, YouTube. Don't think we'll be on YouTube.
Do you want to broadcast for 8 hours?
Well, you never know. Okay, we're live, apparently. So I'll give it a few seconds to warm up because I always find it cuts off the beginning of live shows and people are never around. And I need to tweet about it and everything too.
Oh, it's just come up in my thing.
That. Excellent. That's a good sign. I'll try and find
it. I'm joining.
You're already here.
I mean, on the thing so that I could follow any comments.
Good plan. Good.
How do I? So should it just come up in my? Is this something went wrong?
Oh no! Don't tell me that.
Retry.
So that I can. Oh no! Mine says it's live, so maybe it's just you.
Oh no! You came up a bit then, and then it stopped. Oh, it's just my phone. Rubbish.
Okay, I think we're on, so I will do a little intro and all that as soon as I send out this tweet. I'm just gonna tweet. Share, tweet. So unprofessional.
At least you can get stuff working. My internet is just ruining us at the moment. I keep seeing your face and then it keeps disappearing.
Why would the internet do that to you?
That's so
disappear my face.
I feel sorry for your face.
Yeah.
I'll keep trying, but you might have to be checking out the comments because for some reason I can't.
Okay.
Oh, then I saw my face.
Oh dear. It really doesn't want you to join.
I can get the live chat. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, someone's asking us about getting graphic.
Oh, we need to decide when we're doing the next round of getting graphic. I'm thinking maybe September or October.
September, I'm planning on doing. Actually, I'll talk to you about that when we're not live.
Okay. Secret projects.
Secret project in September. October, I think we're doing the Book Buddy-a-thon again.
Oh, okay. Maybe
but November.
November
would be good, yeah, because November I haven't got anything, and that's my birthday month, so I always like graphic novels.
That sounds like December, a plan. Maybe November.
So maybe November.
We'll have to figure out the date, but maybe November. Okay, let me get the chat up, and then we're ready to go. Okay.
Oh, and then someone's asking why it's saying the 3 2009 finalists.
Well, I will tell you why. So Elena and I. This is Elena from Elena Reads Books. I have put her channel in the description, so if you want to go and check her out, which you definitely should, then you go and check it out there. And we decided that we wanted to do a little project together, and we were looking at loads of book prizes. I think we looked at probably about 10 different ones.
Yeah.
And we just were struggling to kind of find one that we either hadn't already read all the books or that we were both kind of interested in them. And we came across this book prize, which is called the Wellcome book prize, and it focuses on sort of health and science and that sort of area, but it's covering non-fiction and fiction and pretty much any genre as long as they can somehow weave health and science into it, as far as I understand it.
That's
yeah, and it's been going since 2009, and they've done one every year except for 2014 or 2012, something around there.
Yeah, one of those. 2013.
One of those three. Yeah. I'm not sure which off the top of my head, but we decided we wanted to read some of the books from each of the year's shortlists, and we decided we didn't want to read the whole shortlist because there were some books that just sounded a little bit pretentious or really not our thing, and yeah, really dry. So we sort of decided what we'll do is we'll read the winner for each year, because that will give us a hopefully good overview of what the prize, the judges for the prize sort of liked. And then also we were going to pick one other each to read from the shortlist. So that is what we have done for all of the years. And this is us starting with 2009, the first one in all of the years' history of the prize. So that's why it says 2009. That was really long-winded, wasn't it?
But it should be, shouldn't it? Once we've worked it out so that we should finish and be up to date with 2017's winner, just as they announce the shortlist for 2018 next year.
Yeah, hopefully. So fingers crossed we can keep it going month by month and do a little live show at the end of each month or the start of the month, so that we can update you guys on how we've been finding it and what we've been reading generally, because we don't really do enough live shows and we like them. So
yeah, and we haven't discussed this, have we? We didn't buddy read the book, the winner, and we haven't discussed it at all, so we thought it'd be better to do it live so that we can tell each other our thoughts live, and then if anybody else has read it,
buddy read discussion.
Yeah,
because we both read them, we just haven't chatted. Okay, so shall we start off with the books that we both individually picked, and then we'll go on to the winner after that?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, the one that I chose to read is this one. Oh, glare. Three-Letter Plague by Jonny Steinberg. It's a non-fiction book, and it's about Jonny Steinberg's journey when he went over to South Africa, and he was going over there to kind of find out a bit more about AIDS and HIV, because he'd heard a lot of talk about how much of an epidemic it was over there compared to England and the USA and other places that have it, but just nowhere near the same level as Africa. So he went over there and he decided he wanted to write a book about not just AIDS itself or HIV itself, but also about the people who lived there and how they were dealing with it on a regular basis, because a lot of the people who were there didn't really necessarily know that much about it. They either didn't believe it was a real disease, or they just weren't given the information and the tools to treat it, so they didn't think it was something that was real. A lot of people there actually believed in demons and bewitchment, and that being the cause of these terrible sicknesses that people would get associated with it and stuff like that. So he went over there and he met a local man who, I think it's not his real name, it's a pseudonym, and it's called he's called Sizwe. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, because I'm not going to lie, South African names I'm not very good at. But he went over there and he met Sizwe, and he kind of goes on this quite, I think it's over a course of a couple of years, he goes on this quite in-depth sort of learning, talking journey with Sizwe about his life there, sort of growing up, how many people he's encountered with AIDS and HIV. And then it also dwells quite a lot on Médecins Sans Frontières, which is called Doctors Without Borders in the UK. And they went over there and set up quite a lot of HIV testing clinics and AIDS treatment clinics at the same time that Jonny Steinberg was over there. So he was also documenting sort of their progress with how they were getting into the country and what they were doing when they were setting up different help and things like this. And then he also documented it after they moved out of the country, and supposedly the clinics were supposed to carry on their own. So it's over quite a long time period. That was quite a great lengthy sort of intro for you.
That's interesting.
So yeah, that's what it's about. I did actually really enjoy it, which surprised me because I was a little bit unsure if it was going to be my kind of thing. I was interested in like AIDS and HIV anyway, because I think it is a really intriguing and horrible illness to have. And we don't have it very much over in the UK, except in gay communities. It's quite prevalent there, but it's a lot less so in other communities. Obviously people do have it, definitely, but it is a lot more of a minority, and there's a lot more treatment available, readily available to people over here and in other sort of Western countries. So finding out about it from a local's point of view, I thought was really good, because you get Jonny Steinberg's view, and he's actually a gay man himself, and he's tested in the past for HIV, and he tells you a little bit about that, but obviously it was in different circumstances. And then he kind of
someone's just asked when it is he's over there. When is it?
I can't remember exactly. I think it's from 1990 to 2006, 2007, something like that. It's quite a long period of years that he sort of goes and visits and sees. So
it's in the 90s and early 2000s?
Mostly in the early 2000s. I think sort of the 90s is where Médecins Sans Frontières sort of start getting involved with stuff. And he kind of goes over there at a similar time, something like that. He doesn't really talk about the dates too much. He just sort of every now and then gives you a year and says, this year I did this. So
was it published? Was it published quite a while ago then?
It was,
or is it more recent?
2008.
So it wasn't published long after he finished. It wasn't like he left it years.
So yeah, it is definitely an interesting read, because I found his voice as a writer really approachable. Like, he didn't come across as someone who was really factual. He didn't come across as someone who was really pretentious. It was just the kind of down to earth. I went over to this country. I met this man. I discussed all these things with him, and I discussed all these things with the doctors and the healthcare professionals over there. And this is what I learned whilst I was there. And this is kind of my view and their view and all of this stuff. It was never conflicting. It was always like, here's my view, here's their view. They don't always match, but they're both equally valid. And I really like that about him as a writer, like giving voice to all of the different types of people.
So it wasn't bogged down with all of the sort of medical side of it so much.
Which I was really happy with, because I do think sometimes non-fiction you can get a really bad balance of like really heavy fact-driven story that just kind of devolves into nonsense sometimes, because you're like, I don't really know what I'm reading.
This is just too much for my brain.
Pretty much. And I feel like this didn't have that. It had a good balance of like, when you needed to know something, he'd tell you about it, but it was short and it was quick and it was just what you needed to know. And then he'd go back to the sort of more emotional, interesting story of this one individual and the people that he knew in his town. So I really like that about it, definitely.
Did you have any sort of emotional response to it, or was it quite, was his voice quite sort of just matter of fact, or was there an emotional?
Somewhat detached, because I think he didn't really want to get too invested himself whilst he was over there. Like, he was obviously friends with this guy by the end, and he obviously really cared for him and his family, but I don't think he got really deeply enmeshed in their society. He sort of just came over as a visitor who was there to interview. He wasn't there to be like best friends, but because he was over there, he was a white man and he had a car, which is something that most people didn't have. He actually was a great asset to them when he was there, because he could drive them all into the local hospital, which obviously they don't normally get access to. So that was probably a really big bonus for the people who were living in, I think it's called Ithanga. Which
is it quite a remote area?
It's quite a remote area, because he said he wanted to go to a remote area so that he could see what it was like for the normal African people, rather than just like someone who happened to live in a city-based area where there was all this medical care coming in, because he was very aware that if you lived in places that were city-based, then you would be getting very similar treatments to in the UK or US, wherever, because obviously the doctors are there and, you know, you can get there easily. But if you didn't live in those places, which most of them don't, then you can't get there without hours of walking or waiting for the bus that comes once a week or something like that. So there were other stories from different villages that he visited where a mother would lose her child because she'd be waiting for the bus to come that week and it didn't come in time for the child to be saved, and stories like that. But he didn't dwell on those too much. It was sort of just said that these are things that do happen. One thing he did talk about was Sizwe's family and the people in his family who did get HIV positive results. So that was a more emotional part of it.
Did he say, because I have to admit I don't know much about it at all, did he talk about sort of how, like, the reasons it was contracted more in certain places? Because I know in some parts of the world it's there's quite a lot of rape. And I don't know if that's, you know, like the same where he was, but
he didn't touch on rape at all, actually, interestingly enough, but he did talk to quite a few different sort of generations. So I think Sizwe is kind of in his 30s, I think, around 30s, 40s, something like that. So he's sort of midlife. And then he did talk to some of the older generation, the generation before his.
I'm glad you didn't say 30s, 40s was old generation.
No, never. But yeah, he talked to the older generations, and it was interesting to hear what they said, actually, because he was talking to them and they were saying, you know, back in our day, Africa was very much based on farming, and that was the culture that people had. So a lot of people would live in very small communities, they would farm for themselves, and that's how they would live. And when the sort of late 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s sort of hit, that's when things started to change for people coming over from Western worlds a lot more, and bringing different types of infrastructure and culture and whatnot, and changing the way that Africa was run, essentially, to the point where a lot of people could mix a lot more, and a lot of the younger generation was taught that they could be free from doing manual labor. They didn't have to do that, and they should be able to have a voice and have freedom. And I think what they were saying was that a lot of these people who'd all their life been sort of taught that they had to go out and work the farm or whatever, suddenly got this voice of freedom from the Western world and went a bit wild, basically. And they're all saying that the younger generation has just got to a point where everyone believes that sex is something that should just be free and should just be fun. A lot of the culture in Africa was talking about that you shouldn't necessarily have one girlfriend. Like, it's seen as bad if you have one girlfriend. You're seen as a weak man if you've only got one woman. And the actual main character who we're following, Sizwe, he has dedicated himself to one woman at this point in his life, but he talks about how many sexual conquests he had as a child and the fact that he was really proud of that. And so were all his friends, because it's such a big part of the culture for you to go out and have sex and talk about it and like try and conquer different women and have like a really nice time. Not necessarily in a rape way, because I think a lot of the girls were in the exact same mindset that a man was weak if they weren't going out with all sorts of different women. But I found that really interesting because it's definitely a cultural thing. So yeah, really intriguing. But he did talk on that.
Someone's asked you here whether there was much in the book about the political response to it. Like, is there much talk about?
There was a little bit. He talked about how, I don't know if it's president or their leader of their country was kind of quite resistant to it at times. And although Médecins Sans Frontières was sort of welcomed in, they weren't necessarily helped very much. They weren't aided by the government very much. And when they came to leaving, they talked about that they brought in this law that the nurses couldn't actually give out treatment anymore. And obviously that was a massive hindrance because they don't have very many doctors. So the fact that they would then stop nurses from being able to give out treatments without getting signed off by the doctor meant a lot of people who were already on these treatments where they have to come in, you know, once a month to get topped up or whatever, just weren't getting the treatments, and new people weren't being signed up. So he talked in the end of the book a bit about how by the end of the book, he sort of was quite worried about how it was going to continue. And so he went back and he looked at the stats, and it turned out they'd actually managed to increase the number of people they'd signed up because a lot of the nurses were being very underhanded and kind of doing a bit of the dodgy, here you go, but don't tell anyone. So he was quite happy that obviously it's going up, but the laws were not helping that really.
So they didn't, did they have to leave?
Well, basically, I think the plan of them is that they go into countries to provide help for epidemics, and they're supposed to go in there to, like, because AIDS was becoming an epidemic at this point, they decided they were going to go in there, they were going to get professionals who would help to treat these people and teach them and educate them and set up all these clinics. And the idea is that they teach the people who are local there so that they can then leave and all the clinics stay open, the people are trained, they know what they're doing, because a lot of the case it wasn't like no one even knew what it was when they first went over. They were just like, oh, they've died of TB or they've died of whatever it was, like pneumonia, but they didn't realize that these things were because their immune system was shot because they had HIV and AIDS. Like those are things that are treatable, if not curable, and all of the things that came along with that were just other sort of problems they were getting because their immune system was really bad. So yeah.
So what did you end up rating that one?
I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really liked it. I definitely think it was a really informative, interesting book, as you can tell from the fact I've actually got a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
It was really, really well written. I thought it was a really good, solid read. So 4 stars. Very enjoyable. Yes. So that's that. 3 Letter Plague by Jonny Steinberg.
Cool.
What was your pick of the month? Which
I have to admit to being a bit of a bad booktube, but it was a race to get this one finished, and because it's quite a big one and I've still got 30 pages left, but it was Cutting for Stone, Abraham Verghese, and I've wanted to read this for ages actually, and I've always sort of known about it. It's always been on various lists for different things and prizes and up for prizes, but I didn't know much about it. And funnily enough, it's also set in Africa. Well, parts of Africa, but not South Africa. The majority of it is set in Ethiopia.
Okay.
And at the very beginning, the whole story is from the point of view of a boy called Marion. And we don't find out much about him at the beginning. We find out his mother's story, and she's a nun that is sent from India over to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa, to this mission hospital, because she's also a nurse, with some other nurses. And there's like 2 surgeons and 2 nurses in this hospital, and they're sort of scrounging around to try and like treat the people. And we only follow that for maybe the first like 50 pages or so, 50 to 100 pages, and then it's a bit of a spoiler, but no, it's not really a spoiler, I suppose. I'm just checking the back to see if it tells you.
Is this a fiction or a non-fiction?
Yeah, this is fiction.
Okay.
But it's there's lots of non-fiction events that are throughout it. So she dies during childbirth, and Marion and his twin brother are born, and then we follow his story, talking about his life growing up and things that happen. So it's set in the 40s and then 50s and 60s. So we've got the in 1960 there was an Ethiopian political coup where some of the generals from the bodyguard tried to overthrow the emperor. Okay. And so that is something I didn't know anything about. And in fact, when I started reading about it, I was like, this must be a real thing. Surely it's a real. So I started looking it up a little bit more, and I found that quite interesting. And one of the things that comes up halfway through the book, which I found really interesting, was it talks about female genital mutilization. So which is something that still happens, and it happens in the UK as well. And it talks about why this happens and sort of the reasons behind it, and someone in their life close to them it happens to, and so you follow that, and then you also follow so Marion and his brother both end up being surgeons, of different types of surgeons, and there's lots of medical stuff in there, and we're looking at medical so at the time in Ethiopia they were sort of having to like make do and do things like in different ways. They like created their own medical instruments to sort of work for what they needed, and they had their own way of doing things, and you know it would take like 2 months for the medical journals to get to them, so by the time they read them things were out of date. And I have to say, had I not been reading this for this, after about 50 to 100 pages I would have put it down. And that's not because I wasn't necessarily enjoying it. It's just very slow, and it's written in a way, because it's quite slow, and you know it's going to be quite an epic, and it's set over quite a number of years, and you know it's this sort of slower story. I was just like, come on, like I'm struggling here.
Get going.
But when I got to like 200 pages I literally couldn't put it down, and I've read it all day yesterday and today. And partly, you know, started out because I had to, because I was like, I need to read this for this. But I genuinely can't wait to stop the live show and read the last 30 pages.
Well, that's good. At least you've got more on track with it. I do like it when you sort of have that shift in a book. Someone's asked you what the relevance of the title is to the book. Okay, so that is to do with, I've just got to that bit actually. 30 pages from the end. Yeah, not far from the end. Well, I think it probably came up before. Let me find. So basically the surname of the main characters are Stone. So Marion and his brother, their surname is Stone. And it's a kind of a spoiler, but because it's right near the end. One of the brothers, it's to do with I'm trying to think of the way I'm trying to think of how to explain it. So they're talking about these young girls that get sold, or not necessarily sold, but they get married off like at 10 years old. And obviously with marriage, the men that they're with have sex with them, and sometimes not very gently, and they become pregnant, and sometimes at the age of 11 they could be trying to give birth and their bodies can't handle it, and they don't really know what's going on in the village, and so it can sounds very intense. Yeah, it can occur that things happen down below in the female area, and what results is a dead baby. The way of getting the baby out, not very nice. No hospitals for them to go to. There being problems internally, which then cause infection and various other things, to the point where these young girls are dripping fluid down their legs continually for their lives, because they can't do anything to fix it. And it's about this surgical treatment that the brother creates to treat these girls and young women, and to heal them, and to surgically change them. And they call it this cutting for stone method. So sorry, that was a bit graphic there. I suppose that gives you a view of what it's like. Some people have asked how the medical stuff was it a bit too much? Did you find it all right? No, it's not done in a way that it feels hard. So it's interspersed in there, but it's very, like, they talk about things that
that I googled afterwards, because I was like, is this part of the fictional story or is this the real thing? That is something called the Aden method that is talked about briefly, and it's considered by sort of medical, Western medical journals as being sort of too basic, and they explain it in sort of layman's terms, but it's all part of the story. It doesn't feel like let's take a break and talk about a load of medical stuff here, and let's do this. So they'll just be like, and when he was teaching me this, he mentioned this, and so no, the medical stuff wasn't. No, nothing in this is sort of hard. It's not hard to read, but it is slow going. Yeah, it is a proper sort of family.
From looking at it, I felt like it was going to be like that, because it is a fiction book and it's quite a long one, and it's not really like fancy. let's say fantasy. That's what I know. But because it's a general fiction, I suppose, I thought probably it would be a bit of a slow mover.
It's this sort of sweeping saga, because often, like, if a book like this size is split into, say, 4 parts, which this one is, often you'll get each part from a different family member, sort of moving generationally, but this is all one person.
Do you feel like you really got to know that character then? Did you have like connection with them by the end?
Yeah,
and you're into it now.
Well, that was funny, because you know what I'm like, and I really find it hard to connect with male protagonists.
Yeah.
And obviously our character here is a male protagonist, and I find it really difficult. Sorry, my husband's just poked his head in, come back from a run. But I do find it difficult to connect with a male protagonist, but I really did connect with him, and I wonder if that's because of his voice. Like, I don't know, because we spend a lot of time with him, but he's not unusual. I know that sounds weird, but like often you get protagonists that you can't connect with because they're very different from you, or they're psychopaths, or there's something weird going on, and he's just like your average kid trying to find his way, and then the adult, and there's cultural things that come into it. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I think it's well on track to being 4 stars. I'm just seeing if I made any other notes here. I liked the history stuff so far.
I think that's the good thing about both of these books we read. Like, I admit, outside of Europe and even like some parts of Europe, I don't know anything about countries' histories at all. Yeah. So reading something that is non-fiction or fiction with a heavy non-fiction influence really makes you learn, and I like that in my books. Like, I really enjoy learning about a different culture through the eyes of a non-fiction topic, and I think it's quite good that they both had like a sciencey theme that was interesting, but also a lot more going on outside of that. So that's good. Yeah,
they definitely raised, like, there's definitely topics in here, like I said, about the female genital mutilization, which funnily enough came up recently in, I'm doing or I've just completed like that course I'm doing sorry for people watching. I've just completed a course to work as a teaching assistant, and part of the course talks about like having signs to look out for female genital mutilization. So it obviously still occurs quite regularly, and it's just interesting finding out more about that. And I mean, in this case, it's done for such a ridiculous reason.
I mean, there's never a good reason, but yes.
No, but it's just so minimal. Like, it's literally like the girl in here, I mean, it's not really a spoiler, but the girl in here is sort of 14, 15 and starting to be interested in boys, and is wearing, slightly tighter clothes, which her family are buying for her because they feel quite proud that she's like attracting the other sex. And yet when she shows this interest in like sex, and not having sex, but just interest in it, they decide that they're going to do it. It's just madness, but it is really good. I read a few reviews on Goodreads, and a couple of people have said, like, at the very end section, which I have yet to read, that it all fits together, and there's this shocking reveal possibly. So I don't know whether I had the reveal yet. But yeah, it's really, really good, and it's well worth like persevering through the first sort of 100 pages. So it's well on its way to definitely being 4 stars.
Is it a first person book?
No.
No, that's it. That's all you get. It's not. It's actually in second person. Well, that would annoy the hell out of me.
I'm rubbish in person.
Third person? How does it describe them? By name?
Yeah, name.
Third person then.
Yeah, there you go. Third person. Yeah. So Well, yeah, it's sort of, I think it must change actually, because before he's born, it's in third person, but then it just changed.
What to?
Blimey. Yeah, I'm rubbish at this sort of stuff.
Does it say I when it's like?
Yeah, I did this. I got to this.
So I guess it goes third to first then. So
but then at the beginning, you see he's not born.
Yeah, so that must be third person. So there you go. That's your answer. Both.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not very good at third, first, second, whatever person.
I'm relying on you for technical stuff. Second is you, and third is they. That's how I know.
Okay. So, well, actually, maybe it's all first person. The first sentence is, after 8 months spent in the obscurity of our mother's womb, my brother Shiva and I came into the world in the late afternoon of the 20th of September.
Yeah, I would say first person then.
First person.
That was a complicated answer.
Well, it is, but then, yeah, I'm sorry, but it's just weird, because then obviously it goes into like.
I'll just check mine. Mine's also first person.
Because then it goes like after that first chapter, it goes into like Hema fixed her eyes on the ground below, watching for the because they're not born yet. So that section must be third person. Then. Yeah, I think it's a mixture. Apologies for my ignorance, people. Should really learn it.
That's all right. Doesn't matter usually.
Yeah, first and third.
Excellent. So those are the two books we chose on our own from the shortlist, the ones that interested us most. So I'm not surprised that those ones are the ones we probably liked a little bit more than we liked the one that actually won. Bit. Okay, more than a little bit. So the winner was this one, Keeper by Andrea. I've been saying Gillies, but I don't know if that's right. It could be Giles.
I'm thinking it's Gillies, but
okay. Yeah. So this is a book that is written by Andrea Gillies about her mother-in-law, who's called Nancy in this book, but that is a pseudonym. And her mother-in-law and her father-in-law end up moving in with the two of them, her and her husband and their kids, when they all move to Scotland into quite a rural, kind of cut off but very big house in a very small village. They basically move up there because they want a house big enough and cheap enough for them to all live in, and for them to take care of their mother-in-law who's got Alzheimer's. So that's kind of the key topic of the book, Alzheimer's. And she's writing about it kind of in diary form. A lot of these are taken from her diary and really kind of not edited very much. It's quite a raw accounting, or so she says in the beginning. Whether that actually came across is debatable. But that's what she says, that's what she claims. And she sort of talks about the couple of years where Nancy and her father-in-law, whose name was it Morris, maybe?
Yeah,
I think it was Morris.
I think you're right.
And they move in and they sort of live all as a group, shared house essentially. And her husband's working away a lot of the time, so it's mostly down to her to sort of get the kids off to school and then also look after her parents-in-law basically. So what did you think of this one?
Okay, so I'm going to touch on, I've made some points of things that I really enjoy. At the beginning of the book, I was finding it quite interesting. And I thought, like, the first thing I've written down is from page 13, and I've said it's really scary, the statistics that say that 820,000 people in the UK with dementia, and that 2/3 of those are women, and that it's rising. It's doubling every 25 years. So there's 35 million people in the world with it at the moment. 35 million women, is it? And then 65 million estimated for 2030 and 115 million for 2050.
Yeah,
to double check on my page 13.
Madness.
But I like that sort of thing. When it started out and we had that in there, I was like, wow,
really shocking sort of intro to it all, sort of giving you all the facts and figures that you don't necessarily hear about.
So there was 820,000 in the UK and there's 35 million people in the world with dementia. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then I've put below that, I enjoyed the way the chapters alternated, where you had the chapters sort of alternated between a factual chapter, which gave you like dementia facts and about the brain and the sort of technical stuff, and then it sort of alternated with the memoir-y type thing, talking about her actual life. And the only other thing I've put that I quite liked was the Harry Potter. There's a Harry Potter reference in there at one point. very briefly.
Yeah.
But
This is
I
non-fiction, by the way, people asking. It is non-fiction.
non-fiction, and I have to say I wanted to like it.
So did I.
I really wanted to, because I think dementia and Alzheimer's is really interesting. And I think she makes this point at the very beginning about the like the status of like care facilities for people with dementia, and how it is,
poor it is,
how poor it is, and how difficult it is to get the help you need. And so I thought that the idea behind it to sort of raise awareness was really good. But I found it a bit boring.
So did I. I think the problem I found was, like you were saying, it does alternate. I think it's actually within the chapter sometimes. So it's not even like you have one chapter of each, but sometimes she sort of starts a chapter with an anecdotal piece about Nancy and sort of the terrible things that have been going on. And then she'll go into a factual thing about why she might have developed this certain phase. And so she kind of explains it in that way. And I found it initially interesting and then really dull, because I think what she did was go overboard. I feel like this book suffered from too much information, to the point where there were times where I felt like she was being repetitive, and times where I felt like she was just bombarding you with information that you probably don't need to know to understand it and to like feel like you get it. I feel like there were so many times where I was reading it and I was like, do we really need these extra 5 paragraphs about this? We could probably have had the first one and then have been done, because I would have got what you mean. I don't need you to then tell me that things travel down the nerves and the nerves hit this and that hits that, and then you come to this thing. Like, I don't need to know every detail of where it comes from, because I found it really jarring, to the point where I wanted to hear Nancy's story because I found her very endearing and interesting. And I didn't want to hear the factual bit in the second half. In the first half, where she shocked you with the figures, I feel like, yes, definitely necessary, especially the care home stuff, really necessary. But then it just got boring, and I didn't like that. So that was my biggest criticism.
I wonder if she would have been better served, like you said. So doing like maybe an introductory chapter with that side, and then maybe the bit at the end talking a bit more about like the facilities, and then maybe, like you say, in the middle, Nancy's story, and perhaps at the beginning of every chapter there could have been, you know, like in italics, a paragraph, like a
or even
at stage 1.
I feel like there were times in this book where it was quite hard, I think, to connect to the main writer, Andrea Gillies, because her point of view is someone who's a carer, and I'm not a carer. So I don't really know how difficult it can be. And there were times where she said in the book, you're gonna think badly of me for saying this or doing this, and in the moment that's what I did, because you just can't always be the best person or something, or along those lines. And there were times where she would like shout at Nancy, or she'd get mad at Nancy, and you can see why, because it's very draining, it's very you know, taxing on you to be a carer for all the time, 24/7. But also there were times where I was like, I really wish you hadn't done that, because that really doesn't make me like you as a person, even though I understand where you're coming from. It was really hard to like enjoy reading her point of view, because really what I wanted was a fiction book with a happy ending, and I knew I wasn't going to get that.
And also I think one thing she did well was that she didn't try and make Nancy comical.
No,
like she didn't try and make the fact that she was doing these things, you know, and turning up naked when they had a B&B guests and things. She didn't try and turn that into like a joke.
No,
which I think would have lessened it a little bit in terms of like the impact she was trying to make. But I just thought, it, to me, I didn't feel like Morris, Nancy's husband, liked her at all. I mean, he was a complete shitbag, wasn't he?
Tricky character too. Like, he could have been a bit of a stereotype, him, couldn't he? Like, he's probably what stereotypes are based off of, if that's really how he is, because he was very stereotypically grumpy old man. But also I can kind of see why, because like, if you've loved someone and then they forget who you are and they don't trust you and they don't care about you, you know, it would grate on you, I'm certain. But yeah, he did become just a couch potato, essentially. That's what he turned into. And then he started being a bit of a dick and going behind Andrea's back and talking about her to like care helpers and stuff. And just, it was all getting a bit messy there, really. So
I think it must put a big strain on not only your relationship with your in-laws, but also, I mean, because ultimately Nancy's relationship isn't going to be there eventually. But it must put a big toll on your personal relationship, because it's not her parents, she's dealing with her husband's parents, and we didn't get that, did we?
Didn't. And I feel like there was one moment in the whole book where she talks to her husband and she's like, I really can't do this, and he's like, okay, we'll put them in a care home, and that's it. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, that's not surely the only conversation. I feel like what she did a lot in her sort of diary autobiographical stuff was very much write about Nancy and Morris and blame them, probably because she spent a lot of time with them and a lot more than her husband did, so he didn't see it necessarily. He would just be like, oh, you know, you volunteered to do this, so whatever, I'm gonna go do my job and bring in the money. And obviously they needed that. But I just feel like I don't have a partner, but if I had a partner and I was in that sort of situation, I feel like I would be constantly going on at them like, this is your family, I'm so fed up, can't you take a turn? Like, I would be really livid. And I just don't understand that she was directing that to them rather than to him, because it's his family too, like it's as much his as hers. So I feel like there should have been a bit more of a sharing.
And there was
thing.
much more comment about the kids, wasn't there? The kids were getting involved doing stuff, and there was much more comment about their involvement in it. And he really didn't play a role at all.
No, I feel like I got the vibe that he just worked away from home a lot and just wasn't there. I don't know if that's true at all, but that was the vibe I was given, was that he just wasn't around. He just wasn't getting involved. He would always take a step back, and his relationship with his parents deteriorated. So she was the only one left to kind of bridge that gap, and she was putting all her effort into trying to help them and trying to care for them. The story kind of starts out with her condition getting steadily worse, Nancy's condition, because they moved to this new house, and one of the biggest things you're not supposed to do for Alzheimer's patients is take them somewhere they don't know, because it completely destroys what they do have as memories. Like,
because their long-term memory is better.
Long-term memory is better, so they can kind of remember like their hometown, they can remember people and faces and stuff. They don't always know why they think they're kids.
They still think
they still think they're younger. They still believe that they're sort of 60, 50, 40 when they're only when they're like 80, whatever. And it kind of gradually gets worse. But because they moved to this big house, I feel like they actually made it worse quicker. And she obviously realized that once it had happened, but you know, it's done by then. What can you do? And then gradually Nancy's illness sort of deteriorates, and she gets more and more confused and angry and lost and scared, and goes through all different emotions on all different days.
That was quite repetitive, that stage though, wasn't it? I mean, I felt like we were having the same day over and over. And I know maybe that was her whole point, like, but as a reader, I just felt like, I mean, I suppose she achieved that feeling of despair, because I was like, oh, come on, like
yeah, that's true,
why is there no action being taken? And it just made me really angry when it got to the stage where she said they went for that meeting to try and get them into a care home, and all they had to say was that they couldn't cope anymore, and that was almost like a green light to the people to say, oh right, when they say that buzzword, we have to do something. But they were offered maybe 3 or 4 times help. I think I felt like they were offered palliative care. They were offered.
She did try and take some of that, but it ended up just being for Morris, really.
Yeah, well, she kept going, oh, we're okay as we are, and we'll keep going. And then, but that wasn't what she portrayed. Was actually happening in her internalized. So whether she was just kind of being
from the very beginning, she was saying that she was struggling, and then it just got worse as things carried on. But I feel like, she probably should have asked for more help quicker. But in that moment, whether or not she would have known how much the help would have actually worked, things like this. Like my grandma, for instance, is a carer for my granddad. And I and my mum always say to her, like, you need to ask for help, you need to get help in, and she's very resistant to that. So I can kind of see where Andrea was coming from, because I could see it in my grandma. Like, she's very much, she wants to do it for herself, she cares for that person, she loves him, she wants to do it herself, and getting some random person in to help, even if they've got great intentions, is not necessarily what she wants to do. So I could see that, but I also feel like in this situation where you've got young kids in the house, you've got another person you're looking after, like Morris, it's a different situation to two old people.
And the kids were getting like verbally abused and stuff, weren't they?
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like they were getting close to physically abused. She said there were a few times where
had him against the wall,
close. Yeah. So, you know, that's not ideal, really.
We've got a couple of questions. I'm just having a look.
Yeah.
How long is the book, and do you think it would have been benefited from being shorter? So it's
350 pages, just over.
Pages. I don't know if it's the length of the book that's the problem, rather than more the content, like the way it's formatted.
If she'd gone more into the personal side of it and less into the factual, it would have been fine as the length it is, because I don't think it's an overly long book. I just think, like you were saying, it feels repetitive.
It's
and
quite big writing.
Explaining.
Someone else has said, which sort of feeds into that Gillies writes fiction normally. I didn't know that. And they said, would a fictionalized version of her story have been more impactful? And I think maybe yes.
I agree. I think so, because I think that would have taken some of the factual stuff out and made it quite like need to know basis, and also given a bit of leeway for kind of not exaggerating, but telling you the most impactful things at the right moments of the story, rather than giving you the monotony. I know it is meant to be there, but I feel like you're right. It did have scenes, especially in the middle section. I think the beginning and the end were the stronger, but the middle section was definitely a sort of slog. And I think that was how her reality was, but also as a reader, it's how our reality was. And I was not enjoying that.
What did you end up giving it as a rating?
I gave it 3 first, but I think on thinking about it, I'm dropping it to like a 2.52.
I gave it 2.
I just feel like it had a lot of interesting topics, and I really wanted to like it. And I do think it does represent Alzheimer's as well. I don't think it does has a problem with that at all.
I just think maybe it wasn't structured very well.
I think the fact that it comes from her diary, and you can kind of tell that, was probably a problem rather than a benefit. I think if it had had the benefit of like a good editorial team going through it with a bit of a fine comb and saying, let's cut this, let's change that slightly, it would have probably helped it rather than hindered it. But it's not. I mean, like
they obviously thought it was good, because they
obviously did. I think it's very good in terms of raising awareness of Alzheimer's. Like, I learned a lot from the book that I didn't know about it and how the disease works, but maybe a bit too much for what I really wanted to know. Because I guess when you're in the situation, you're going to be constantly Googling and finding all this stuff out. But if you're not in that situation and you're just reading it to find out a bit about the topic and maybe get a bit of a personal reaction, which is kind of what we were doing, then it doesn't necessarily hit all the boxes for you when you've got that much detail. Yeah.
I'm just having a look on the Wellcome prize to see if it tells like why it doesn't. They don't give you
information about why it won.
No.
I think they just have a slightly longer blurb. I should have linked the website down below, but I think it's just www.welcomebookprize.com. Is that right? Something like that.
Welcomebookprize.org.
There you go. So if you want to look it up, I'll add it to the description after we're not live. So anyone not watching this not live, you can go and check it out. So yeah, that's our first 3 books then, or 2 each. But 3 in total. I think this has worked quite well, because I'm now intrigued to read the one that you discussed. So
yeah, and I'm intrigued about your one. We might have to post them to each other.
Of your one? I feel like maybe
no, there isn't. There isn't. No, but I'll be finishing it tonight, so I'll bring it with me when I see you next week.
Yeah,
and you can take it with you.
Trade. Yeah, I can give you my one. Maybe we'll do that.
Trade it off.
Yeah, no, it was a good experience in terms of reading stuff outside my comfort zone. It definitely did that, but also I felt like it was a really interesting way to have a discussion about something I probably would not normally have done. So
yeah, definitely. And I think I just don't pick up non-fiction as often as I should, and bigger books that I think I'm gonna like I've always thought I'm gonna like Cutting for Stone. And it's had great reviews, and I've always thought, oh yeah, but I don't pick it up because it scares me.
Yeah,
taking that time. Sometimes it scares me to like take the time and spend a week reading, because this has probably taken me 5-6 days to read, and normally, I can read a book in a day or 2, and because of the way the books are, and so sometimes I think it's good to sit down and have to like sit and just take it slower and slow it down a bit, and And I don't mind doing that if you benefit from it at the end, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I think with me it's like I obviously read a lot of long books, so I'm not intimidated by the size of books, but what I am intimidated by is topics, and non-fiction can be quite dry, and I really find dry non-fiction to be a struggle to get through, even if I'm interested in the topic, even if it's like well written, but it's just hard or like complex. It does take me a while. So, for example, I'm reading They Can't Kill Us All at the moment by Wesley Lowery.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And it's a really short book, but it's taken me all month to get through it because it's just a non-fiction, and it's pure non-fiction. There's like no real anecdotal stuff. It's kind of a little bit of anecdotal, but a lot of fact. And that I like it, I'm enjoying it, but it just takes me that much longer. And it's
you just have to digest it, don't you? You want to digest
just
all
want
the
to give it a bit
facts
of time, and it's a different reading experience than fiction, definitely. But also there are some that I've read that have been great. So, you know, it's what you make it. I find memoirs a lot easier because they're relatable, even if
I'm
they're
waiting till we get to
crazy.
The Emperor of All Maladies.
Yeah, that should be a good one.
I'll be starting that one early in the month.
I know. So will I. I've got that on my Kindle because it's so big. I thought, right, I'll just get that on the Kindle.
So what are we reading next month?
Speaking of, what are we reading next month? Well, the one that won, so the one that we're both going to be reading, is this one, which is called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. And I believe it is about a woman who had her cells taken and tested, but she never knew that they were taken and tested. And then they helped to find a cure for cancer, or a treatment for cancer. And then later her daughter was tracked down by Rebecca Skloot, who wrote the book. And it's about a lot to do with like permission for taking people's cells and testing, and how it's a benefit and how it's like an invasion of people's privacy, stuff like that. So it sounds pretty interesting. So I'm hopeful.
I've heard really good things about
I've also heard pretty good things. I've seen a lot of good reviews. So
I'm excited about that one.
So yeah, I'm hoping we'll both like this. Fingers crossed. And then my pick for next month is this one, which is
I can't see it.
It's too bright. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, So Much for That by Lionel Shriver, who is the author of We Need to Talk About Kevin, if you've heard of that, which is quite a famous one.
Yeah.
She is one of Mercedes' favourite authors. So I'm intimidated because sometimes Mercedes and I really agree and sometimes we do not. And it's a chunky-ish book. It's like, I don't know. Oh my God, the type is... Oh no, it's okay. I thought the type was tiny, but it was just the pages at the back were like micro type. I thought, oh my God, but it's okay. It's normal size, the rest of it. So it's like 530 pages.
Okay.
It's not too bad, I suppose. I might start this one first to get it done. And I think this one is about, it's a bit of a weird one. It's like about a husband and wife, and the husband wants to go and travel after he retires, and then the wife is like, no, you can't go travel because I need your health insurance because this has happened to me, but it doesn't say exactly what. And that's kind of it. It deals with their relationship to each other and like dealing with her health problems, whatever they might be. I think that's all I kind of know about it. So I'm guessing it's going to be pretty character driven because I know that's what Mercedes likes. I'm probably really slow. So I'm going to try and get into it early and hopefully it'll be good and have a good payoff in the end. But I'll let you know.
Well, let me know. Well, my one's it's going to be a quicker one this month, I think.
That sounds good.
Although some people have told me they didn't enjoy it. So I hate going into a book knowing that, but I'm not going to let it taint me. It's called Grace Williams Says It Loud by Emma Henderson.
Yeah.
I know nothing about this. It says on the back, the doctors said no more could be done and advised Grace's parents to put her away. On her first day at the Royal Mental Institute, Grace, aged 11, meets Daniel. Debonair Daniel, an epileptic who can type with his feet, sees a different Grace, someone who share secrets and canoodle with, someone to fight for. A deeply affecting spirit-stirring story of love against the odds.
That one sounds quite up your street, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be one of those page-turnery books. But I have heard mixed things about it. But I like the idea that it's a child narrators by the sounds of it. So we shall see. It looks by the look of their clothes, it looks like it might be set like in the 40s or the 50s.
Okay.
So what does it say? 19, oh no, in the 80s. Oh no, it goes back to the 40s. Yeah, 40s and 50s. But yeah, I think it's going to be good. I'm interested. Oh, and it was shortlisted for the Orange Prize in 2011 as well.
See, this one that I'm reading was the Orange Prize winner. Oh no, wait, that was We Need to Talk About Kevin. That was the Orange Prize winner. Never mind. Forget it. This one's obviously the dud. Oh God.
It'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine. But we will let you guys know. We will be doing another live show on Eleanor's channel next time. I will help her set it up.
If I can work out how to do it, yeah. You can teach me next weekend.
It out. It was actually really easy when I did it, like super easy. So yeah, should be fine. And it'll probably be a similar sort of time, but we'll let you know the date nearer the time because I can't remember it. Have we got it in?
I think like it's maybe the first weekend of, didn't we say it was the first weekend of September, I think, because I'm away.
Oh yeah, the 2nd of September, probably similar time, around 8:30. So
yeah, that's good for us
because have that in your head, and we'll let you know if that changes and try and remind you near at the time. But it will be on Eleanor's channel next time as well. So go and check her out. Go and subscribe.
Read those books if you want to join us for a bit more of a debate.
Let us know which ones you would be most interested in reading in the comments and stuff below. And thank you for joining me on my channel to chat about the Wellcome Book Prize stuff. We're not paid or sponsored for this. We just decided we wanted to do it because why not? So it's been fun.
I think it's just good to be pushed out of our comfort zone and try different things. And I like the fact that we've, we're obviously reading the winners because that's not a choice that we're giving ourselves. But I like the fact that we're getting to pick from these other books ourselves. And actually, it happened quite organically. I think there's only like 3 months where we're reading the same books because we wanted to, and we're reading 3 books those months. But
we've gone a bit mad some months, but let's hope we can manage it. But I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be good. So that is kind of it, guys. Don't think we've got any other questions. I'll just have a little check just in case, but I don't think we have. And then we will head off. So
I'm going to go and finish my book in a minute.
Yeah, you've got to finish yours. A couple of people have said that they think they're going to read your one. So it sounds like
it's a shame it's not got an audio book.
It's a shame. It would be quite a good longer books always.
I mean, maybe in other country it will, but on Audible in the UK, I don't think it's on. But you maybe be able to get it from the library or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if it does have audio available, but it's well worth the effort, I think.
Good stuff. Yeah. Well, that is it then. So thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time on Eleanor's channel. Bye, guys.
Bye.